Welcome back to Lore for Rest from deep in the House of Lore, a relaxing, quietly voiced study series of a few of our favorite stories. Visuals will be limited, so feel free to close your eyes or focus on other things. Let's get started. Edgar Markov was an alchemist facing a terrible time. Famine was sweeping the plain of Innistrad, hunger ravaging its way through the belly of every nearby city. Desperate and ever seeking further, more intense measures, his ear was finally bent by Shilkingar, a demon who promised that the answer to not only satiating his hunger, but also to eternal life was drinking the blood of an angel. Ever the studious and zealous scientist, Edgar enlisted the help of his sons, and in a blasphemous act, exsanguinated the angel myriad. From her blood, a strange elixir was brewed, and in one scathing moment of truth, Edgar Markov drank. From this singular act rose an entirely new world of vampires. I'd like to interject here. Facts, of course, are the meat of any study, but I often find their espousing to leave little room for conjecture or inner thoughts on them. I find it fascinating that despite being the alchemical progenitor on Innistrad, Edgar Markov did not invent vampires in the overarching realm of Magic the Gathering. They exist on a vast number of planes that do not include his meddling. Anyway, let's continue. With his newfound zeal for life and blood intact, Edgar began doling out this sanguinary marvel to his heirs. Upon administering, forcefully, I might add, the brew to his grandson Soren, he inadvertently ignited a latent spark within him, flaring to life that of a planeswalker's powers. Soren was yanked from his mortal existence on Innistrad and into the other planes of the blind eternities, all while undergoing a terrible transformation into the vampire we all know today. Despite the shocking revelation behind Soren Markov's transformation, Edgar continued to dispense the tainted blood, transforming those of the likes of Olivia Valdarin and Runo Stromkirk, as well as the progenitor of the Falconwrath line, which, to my knowledge, we're unsure who that might be. If you for sure know who it is, please let me know in the comments. This act eased one famine and eventually created another. Certainly, fewer people relied on normal food for sustenance, but a greater number of beings relied on blood. And, well, those creatures fed on the starving citizens, ushering in a terrible cycle. The plain, for all its other problems, became an even more cruel and inhospitable place. Soren did not stay gone from Innistrad, however, and eventually returned to his home plane to find it overrun with vampires wreaking havoc, werewolves terrorizing the wilds of Kessig, demons prowling, and the entire ecosystem completely out of balance. His plan to save the plane was twofold: create a prison for grave offenders and create a protector. The Hell Vault, a monolith meant to prison the unusually powerful supernatural creatures found there, was crafted from a sliver of the silver moon that hung above, thanks to the knowledge he had gained from another planeswalker on his ventures, Nahiri. In the same night, he would create their savior. The Archangel Avacyn, birthed from his desperate desire. In addition to channeling the plane's beliefs about its silver moon and life after death, Soren used his own soul and mastery over mana, a huge reservoir of power considering he was a pre-mending, godlike planeswalker. Avacyn rose and battled the tide of darkness that had threatened to swallow Innistrad. It is a cruel symmetry that our salvation was born of the Markov family. S. Markov, a creature so ancient and powerful that he survives even today. Seeing that our destruction and theirs were inexorably linked, Soren created Avacyn, a force to rally our remaining angels, a force that we could unite under, a force constructed to hold in check the very vampires who created her. A quote from the Lunark's journal. Avacyn did indeed bring the chaos of Innistrad under heel, giving humans of the plane a rallying being, someone to worship, to pray to. Before long, the face of Innistrad had changed, and every single thing bearing the mark of the archangel that had brought them salvation. Unfortunately, all things must end, and all cycles must continue. Despite his every good intention, Soren was marked as a traitor against his kind for the creation of Avacyn, and unfortunately, the story of the Markovs only gets worse from here. Innistrad was not immune to outer beings. A few of the most notorious creatures in all of Magic the Gathering at some point making their presence known. The Markovs and the plane itself at various points had their hands full dealing with planeswalkers such as Nahiri, who felt slighted by Soren in her efforts against the Eldrazi, and after a tussle was sent into the Hell Vault. Liliana, who came to the plane to fight an imprisoned Griselbrand. Griselbrand himself, a demon who approached the Hell Vault and Avacyn to incite combat. Emrakul, the Keening Mother herself, and Phyrexians. Yes, there is a lot happening on Innistrad. The history of vampires and the plane of Innistrad is one that spans millennia. So long, in fact, that numerous events all pile atop one another, so many things happening simultaneously, or while one piece of the puzzle is in use elsewhere. Soren, as history knows it, is at least 7,000 years old, making his progenitor even more ancient. Since this study is specifically dedicated to the Markovs, the progenesis of vampires, and how it relates to Innistrad's history, we'll have to leave some of the finer details to another venture. Let's bring the focus in on Griselbrand. A demon most powerful, Griselbrand and his hordes ravaged Innistrad before being brought down by Avacyn. The demon challenged Avacyn to direct combat, a battle that waged for days before the Archangel summoned her last bit of strength and forced the demon into the Hell Vault with his underlings. In his last act of defiance, Griselbrand impaled Avacyn with a spear, her spell whipping up around them, imprisoning both the demon and Archangel within. Soren Markov's carefully crafted guardianship was gone. In time, the planeswalker Liliana would visit Innistrad, specifically searching for Griselbrand. He had created a pact that enslaved her soul, and she, understandably, did not like that. In opening the Hell Vault, Liliana not only unleashed the demons held within, but also Avacyn, and the long task of restoring balance began once again. With the Hell Vault open, the previously imprisoned Nahiri made her way back to her home plane of Zendikar, which had been ravaged by the Eldrazi in the 1,000 years of her captivity. Devastated by the losses she saw, Nahiri swore vengeance against Soren Markov for his flippant lack of action and vowed to make Innistrad suffer the same terrible fate as Zendikar. She returned in full force, attacking Markov Manor and torturing the vampires within. Using many monuments to channel the natural energy of the ley lines in Innistrad, Nahiri called to Emrakul, the Eldrazi Titan, summoning the mighty beast to the plane. These monuments, called cryptoliths, caused those created by mana to go mad, which included Avacyn. The Radiant Savior now believed her devotees to be corrupted, and thus the reign of terror began anew on Innistrad. with archangels attacking the very humans they vowed to protect. Soren Markov, away planeswalking, returned to see the hell enacted upon his home plane. Realizing this would be an uphill battle, Soren entreated the other vampire families to assist in fighting the multiple threats tearing through the land. A part of the legacy's cruel deal? Soren must destroy Avacyn. Painfully, Soren agreed to do so. He encountered Avacyn at her cathedral, having cornered the planeswalkers Jace and Tamio, her madness bearing down on them. He tried speaking to her casually, even offering to let her kill the planeswalkers before moving to the cellar, where, despite the deal he had struck, he hoped to cleanse Avacyn of her affliction. Avacyn, in a moment of clarity, blamed Soren himself for making her easily influenceable and thus corruptible. He was at fault for everything. The two fought mercilessly, and Soren eventually drained his archangel of blood before desperately pleading with her, begging to make her anew without such flaws. Ever proud, Avacyn declared, "If I am not the daughter you want, then we must battle again and again, forever, for I will never yield. I am no monster's instrument. I will not be altered by the likes of you." And rather than plainly describe the moment to you, I'd like to pull another quote directly from her story, I Am Avacyn. "I cannot see his face now because he turns away from me. I cannot see whether he is monster or man. I can only see the point of that sword. I can only hear ancient words, words of a ritual performed in reverse, words of a gift being revoked. I can only feel my knees dropping onto the unyielding limit of the cathedral floor. I can only smell the ash of some nearby smoldering. I can only touch the shadow on the floor under me, the shape that marks my first moment. I can only say to you, in this my final prayer to the world, that I only ever meant to keep the innocent from harm. I am Avacyn. I am to protect." After an entire millennia of hope and protection, Soren Markov destroyed his creation, the magnum opus of his long life, and Innistrad was entirely vulnerable. And then Emrakul came. Heralded by Nahiri herself, the Eldrazi Titan devastated the land. Soren encountered Nahiri in Markov Manor, still a cruel taunt of vampires encased in the very stone of the building, and the two fought. Eventually, Soren too was trapped in stone, while Nahiri escaped the plane entirely. Conscious in his prison, Soren was forced to watch as Emrakul moved across his beloved Innistrad, an act made worse by Olivia Valdarin, who found Soren in this vulnerable state. Laughing and jeering at him, Olivia declared herself the new lord over Innistrad, stealing Soren's fabled sword as she did so. Now, you may be asking yourself, where is Edgar Markov during all of this? Being ancient and tired of the realm, Edgar would often retreat to his coffin deep within Markov Manor and induce sleep until the age of the world felt new again. This passivity might seem callous against the world he wrought, full of vampires, but he felt no particular loyalty to the people or their plights, unlike his grandson. Soren would often visit his grandfather, despite their estrangement over the millennia, garnering advice or leaving books regarding the current world state. After the events that found Soren imprisoned in stone, Edgar's coffin was stolen by Olivia Valdarin, who arranged a marriage between herself and the vampire progenitor. In a charmed stupor, Edgar agreed. Now, this phrasing might make it seem like a short length of time, but remember that vampire lives are long and varied, and none of this happens particularly quickly. In between these events, Soren Markov frees himself of his stone prison, carving, perhaps chewing, his way out. He sets off for Ravnica, spurred by the call of the interplanar beacon, its message fueled by the multiversal threat Nicol Bolas. Realizing that Nahiri had also been summoned, he wastes no time in reigniting their feud, savagely battling his former friend over the terrible fate of his plane. Only in a moment of absolute desolation did they temporarily call a truce, fighting against the Elder Dragon in hopes of pushing back the ravaging tide. It was after this that Soren returned to Innistrad, finally taking in the immense grief of all that had transpired. He had tried to save the people of his home, only to be met with disdain and being forced to destroy his most cherished creation, only to be betrayed in the end. In his absence, Imracul had been imprisoned within the silver moon hanging in the sky, which caused the day and night cycles to fluctuate and a strange, magical frost to spread across the land. While werewolves ravaged the darkened plain, citizens feared an event known as the Eternal Night, a perpetual night in which there was no escape. Crops failed in their fields in the waning sun, and once again Innistrad was desolate and desperate. Without a focal point of belief, these citizens turned to ancient rites of the land, seeking the Dawnheart Coven and a ritual to disrupt the encroaching night. Of course, Olivia Valdarin interrupts this ritual and steals the Moonsilver Key, an item of utmost importance to the success of the ritual, and fled. The Eternal Night was upon them. Soren was tired. So tired of the misery and pain and how desperately he had tried to save Innistrad from itself. While others rallied to save the plane from this impending doom, he was apathetic and uncooperative. Eventually, he was spurred to action by Arlen Cord and the Gatewatch to assist in reclaiming the Moonsilver Key. Now, we have several different events converging on the timeline. Olivia Valdarin wants to use the key to take over angelic flights, having imprisoned Sigarda, who rallied any remaining angels after previous events. She would gain immense political power by charming and marrying Edgar Markov, thus being able to overtake Innistrad herself. While she machinated all of this, the plane fell further into despair. Vampires were requiring daily blood tithes from humans on threat of death, and werewolves overran the cities, while everything else about the plane crumbled into ruin. We can tie everything back together in the events of Crimson Vow. Soren and the Gatewatch planned to crash the wedding and steal the key, not to mention save his grandfather and the entire plane from a terrible fate. Only one of these people had an invitation, however, forcing Soren to enter the event alone. He was led to Edgar's chambers and forced to watch as Olivia stirred him back to life with her blood. Edgar Markov was enraptured. Soren screamed warnings at him. None of them heeded as he was dragged away, his other family members joyful at the awakening of their blood-blessed Edgar. During the exchange of vows, Soren attacked Olivia, while a cacophony of sounds erupted. The Dawnheart Coven brought forth their leader's spirit held within the key, and that spirit freed Sigarda, who exploded with holy power, tearing the room apart. The wedding was thoroughly crashed. While Olivia fled, Soren confronted his grandfather, who had fled into Valdarin Manor's Sanguitorium, a secured location for additional blood stores should humans become scarce. As they fought, Edgar expressed his disappointment in his grandson's wasted potential, while Soren accused Edgar of pure callousness while damning his entire family to the eternity of vampirism. Falling into terrible flashbacks, Soren was unmoored and later awakened in a pit of blood, his grandfather sneering from above. Letting his apathy get the best of him, Soren sank further and further into the pit of despair. Sorry, Not sorry for the reference. Reflecting on his grandfather's words and the legacy that Soren had tried to create with the life he had been given. Eventually snapping out of his stupor, Soren imbibed the blood surrounding him, healing his wounds and spurring him to rise. Meanwhile, Edgar rushed back towards the ballroom, attacking a planeswalker named Teferi, who had come to assist Arlen in the Gatewatch. Before long, he was once again met by Soren, who wielded a massive greatsword against him. It was a quick fight. Defeated and downtrodden, Edgar Markov was at the mercy of his grandson. Rather than killing his progenitor, Soren ordered him to leave. Edgar hurried away, chased by Arlen and her packmate Tovalar. He found Olivia, who dropped the Moonsilver Key in defeat, and they escaped the scene together through the stained glass broken by Sigarda. The events of Midnight Hunt and Crimson Vow kind of mush together here. The story of Midnight Hunt claims that Soren was in possession of the key beforehand, and only after sulking and being berated by Sigarda did Arlen and company claim the key from him, thus allowing the Dawnheart Coven to initiate the ritual, which was eventually foiled by Olivia Voldaren, which would lead to the forces working together in Crimson Vow, which seems odd in my opinion. Perhaps in his justifiable brooding, Soren came back to his senses. Either way, the Moonsilver Key was eventually united with the Sun Gold Lock, and the sun shone once again on Innistrad, the Eternal Night's sorcery broken. After the events of Crimson Vow, Soren would continue to work with Arlen Cord and other planeswalkers, particularly when the Phyrexian threat loomed over several of the planes. As for Edgar and Olivia, their current whereabouts seem to be unknown. And there you have it. A history spanning thousands of years, all sourced from a single, desperate man who changed the destiny of an entire plane with his actions. I've mentioned before that Innistrad is one of my favorite planes, and I absolutely love the history of it all. In addition to the internal world of Innistrad, characters from the plane also affected the outside world in interesting ways. Soren was the first printed Magic the Gathering Planeswalker card to introduce emblems, which, if you've ever played with the mechanic, can be a lot of fun, or super nasty to the table. If you're a Magic the Gathering history buff, you know that the technical first quote-unquote emblem was retroactively printed to be Elspeth, Knight Errant, but still, Soren did do it first, once upon a time. Edgar Markov is currently the number 2 commander in all of the decks listed on EDHREC, dethroning Atraxa for the spot, while he is yet to catch up to the Ur-Dragon, who is still nearly 2,000 decks ahead. One of the best story flavor cards ever printed, in my opinion, is Shilgengar, Sire of Famine, who of course kicked off this entire thing by tempting Edgar into stealing the blood of an angel to begin with. His card has you making blood tokens by sacrificing creatures, and if you sacrifice an angel, you get a lot more of them. Should you sacrifice enough blood tokens, you can turn around and bring creatures back from the dead as vampires. Story perfection. Shilgengar only got printed in Modern Horizons 3, which makes it surprising that such a storied player in the realm took so long to get an official card. Thank you all so much for joining me once again in the study. I'm very grateful to each viewer that shows up and shares my favorite stories with me. See you next time, deep in the house of lore.